The investigation into Nolan Wells has entered another important stage. A newly released FBI statement has clarified the federal agency's role. GPS data has provided investigators with a more detailed picture of the boat's movements on the 4th of July, and the public is once again asking whether those developments finally explain what happened, or whether they raise even more questions than before. On the surface, it might seem as though investigators are getting closer to the answer. But when you look carefully at what officials have actually confirmed, a different picture begins to emerge. The timeline is becoming clearer in some respects, yet several of the most important questions remain unanswered. Investigators continue to separate verified evidence from rumors that have spread across social media, while Nolan's family continues to wait for the kind of answers that no parent should ever have to seek. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. Here we take our time with cases like this, following the confirmed evidence step by step, distinguishing documented facts from speculation, and allowing the investigation, not internet rumors, to guide the story. Before his name appeared in headlines across the country, Nolan Wells was simply an 18-year-old beginning a new chapter of his life. Family and friends have described him as someone who enjoyed football, spending time outdoors, and being with the people he cared about. After graduating from Ocean Springs High School, he was preparing for his future at Southwest Mississippi Community College, where he planned to continue both his education and his football career. For those closest to him, Nolan was more than another face in a news report. He was a son, a friend, a teammate, and someone whose future seemed full of opportunity. That is why this case has remained deeply personal for his family, even as it has become the subject of national attention. Everything changed on July 4th. According to investigators, Nolan traveled with a group to Horn Island, one of Mississippi's barrier islands located several miles off the Gulf Coast. Every Independence Day, the island attracts hundreds of visitors arriving by private boats. Families gather along the shoreline, groups anchor in shallow water. Music carries across the beaches, and people move freely from one gathering to another. Photographs taken that day show clear skies, white sand stretching toward the Gulf, and dozens of boats anchored close together offshore. From a distance, it looked like an ordinary holiday celebration. No one there could have imagined that the day would end with an investigation that would soon draw statewide and eventually national attention. According to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, Nolan became separated from others during the outing. Exactly how that occurred remains one of the central questions investigators have been trying to answer. Authorities have conducted dozens of interviews with people who were on the island that day, comparing witness statements against digital evidence and physical findings in an effort to reconstruct the sequence of events. As is often the case in investigations involving large crowds, witness recollections have not always matched perfectly. Some people remembered events differently. Others admitted they were uncertain about exact times because they were focused on enjoying the holiday rather than keeping track of the clock. That is one reason investigators place significant value on electronic records whenever they are available. Here's where things changed. One of the most closely watched developments came when GPS information from the boat involved in the trip became public. According to reporting by CBS News, investigators obtained tracking data that documented the vessel's movements throughout the day. The records showed when the boat departed the mainland, when it reached Horn Island, and when it later returned. Unlike human memory, GPS records provide timestamps generated automatically by the vessel's navigation system. They cannot explain conversations or motives, but they can establish when and where a boat traveled. For investigators, that type of information serves as an objective reference point. For the public, however, the GPS release produced a different reaction. Rather than settling the discussion, it sparked an entirely new round of questions. Many people immediately began comparing the GPS timeline with statements that had circulated online. Some believed the electronic data supported earlier accounts. Others argued that it highlighted gaps that investigators still needed to explain. Officials, however, have urged caution. The GPS information documents the boat's movements, not every movement of every individual who was present that day. It cannot determine where someone walked after leaving the boat. It cannot reveal conversations that occurred onshore, nor can it explain the circumstances that ultimately led to Nolan's death. Those questions require investigators to combine multiple forms of evidence, including witness interviews, forensic examinations, digital records, and autopsy findings. Meanwhile, another development drew national attention. Because of the intense public interest surrounding the investigation, many people wondered whether the FBI had officially taken over the case. That assumption spread quickly across social media. But according to the FBI itself, that is not what has happened. In a recent public statement, the Bureau explained that the Jackson County Sheriff's Office remains the lead agency investigating Nolan Wells' death. Federal agents said they are providing assistance when requested and are using federal resources where appropriate. The FBI also confirmed that it has opened a separate investigation into interstate threats directed toward individuals connected to the case, making clear that this inquiry is distinct from the death investigation itself. That clarification answered one important question while leaving others unresolved. Federal involvement often causes people to assume a dramatic change has occurred behind the scenes. In reality, assistance from the FBI is not unusual in high-profile investigations when local authorities request specialized expertise or additional resources. It does not necessarily indicate that federal investigators have reached different conclusions from local detectives. Another detail deserves attention. Throughout the investigation, Nolan's family has consistently emphasized that they want a complete and transparent review of every piece of evidence. Attorney Ben Crump, representing the Wells family, has publicly stated that the family continues to seek answers regarding Nolan's final hours. He has also said they are awaiting the results of additional forensic examinations and want investigators to pursue every credible lead before drawing conclusions. That careful approach reflects an important reality. Complex death investigations rarely hinge on a single piece of evidence. Instead, detectives build the case one verified fact at a time. A witness statement may explain one portion of the timeline. Digital records may confirm another. Laboratory testing may answer questions that eyewitnesses cannot. Only after those separate pieces begin fitting together can investigators confidently determine what happened. At the same time, social media has continued moving much faster than the official investigation. Since Nolan's death, countless posts have claimed to reveal hidden evidence, secret witnesses, or dramatic breakthroughs. Some videos have attracted millions of views. Others have circulated screenshots that viewers interpreted in entirely different ways. Officials have not confirmed many of those claims. That distinction matters because an allegation repeated thousands of times online does not automatically become evidence. Investigators must verify information before relying on it. They cannot base conclusions on popularity or speculation. They must base them on facts. That difference has become one of the defining features of this case. The public wants immediate answers. Investigators are moving methodically through interviews, forensic reports, digital evidence, and official findings. Those two timelines rarely move at the same speed. Meanwhile, questions surrounding the medical findings remain an important part of the investigation. Authorities have not yet publicly released every detail regarding the final forensic conclusions, and Nolan's family has continued seeking independent review alongside the official investigative process. Until investigators complete that work, officials have been careful not to announce conclusions that the evidence does not yet support. For many observers, patience has become increasingly difficult. Every new document seems to answer one question while creating two more. Every official statement brings fresh discussion. Every confirmed fact is quickly surrounded by new theories online. But perhaps the biggest question of all remains surprisingly simple. Now that investigators have a more complete GPS timeline, dozens of witness interviews, digital evidence, and continued assistance from the FBI, what piece of the puzzle are they still trying to verify before they can explain, with confidence, exactly what happened during Nolan Wells' final hours? That question takes us to the next major phase of the investigation, where forensic evidence, witness accounts, and the growing public debate begin to intersect in ways that could shape everything investigators do next. As investigators continued assembling the timeline, another challenge became impossible to ignore. It wasn't simply determining where people had been or when certain events occurred. It was deciding which accounts could be independently verified and which could not. That distinction has become one of the defining features of the Nolan Wells investigation. In the days immediately following July 4th, investigators began interviewing everyone they could identify as having been on Horn Island or traveling with Nolan that afternoon. According to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, more than 60 people were eventually interviewed. Some conversations lasted only a few minutes. Others required follow-up interviews as detectives compared one account with another. That process may sound straightforward, but anyone who has followed a major investigation knows it rarely is. Imagine standing on a crowded beach during a holiday celebration. Boats are arriving and leaving. Music is playing. Groups of friends are spread out across the sand. Some people are swimming while others are cooking, talking, or walking along the shoreline. Hours later, investigators begin asking everyone to remember exactly who they saw, where they stood, and what time certain events happened. Even people trying to be completely truthful can remember details differently. That is why investigators never rely on witness statements alone. Instead, they compare those statements with photographs, cell phone records, electronic data, surveillance footage where available, and forensic evidence. Every source either strengthens or weakens the reliability of the overall timeline. Meanwhile, Nolan's family continued speaking publicly, making it clear that their search for answers had not slowed. Attorney Ben Crump, who has represented the Wells family during the investigation, has repeatedly said the family wants a complete accounting of Nolan's final hours. Following meetings with investigators and prosecutors, Crump explained that the family believes every available piece of evidence should be examined before any final determination is announced. For Nolan's parents, that request is deeply personal. They are not simply looking for a timeline. They want to understand exactly what happened to their son. That brings us to one of the most discussed developments since the investigation began: the role of digital evidence. Modern investigations are very different from those of 20 or 30 years ago. Today, a person's cell phone, smartwatch, location history, photographs, text messages, and social media activity can all become part of an investigation. Vehicles record information. Boats store navigation data. Even fitness applications can sometimes provide timelines investigators may find useful. Officials have not publicly released every category of digital evidence collected in Nolan's case, and investigators have been careful not to describe material that has not yet become part of the public record. That restraint is common. Detectives often withhold certain information because releasing it too early could affect future interviews or compromise aspects of an ongoing investigation. Still, the GPS records that have become public illustrate why digital evidence has drawn so much attention. According to reporting on the investigation, the boat's tracking information established key points in its travel that day. Those timestamps gave investigators an objective framework around which other evidence could be organized. But that's only part of the story. A timeline, no matter how accurate, does not explain intent. It cannot tell investigators why decisions were made. It cannot reveal whether someone misunderstood a situation, acted carelessly, or deliberately withheld information. Those answers require additional evidence. As public discussion intensified, another issue began attracting almost as much attention as the investigation itself: rumors. Within days, social media platforms were flooded with claims from anonymous accounts. Some posts suggested secret witnesses had come forward. Others claimed investigators had already solved the case but were withholding the truth. Videos appeared analyzing photographs frame by frame, while online commentators debated details that officials had never confirmed. Some viewers understandably wondered whether any of it could be true. The answer, at least for now, is that many of those claims remain unverified. Investigators have repeatedly emphasized that the public should distinguish between official announcements and speculation circulating online. That advice may not be as exciting as a viral theory, but it reflects how criminal investigations actually work. Evidence must be documented. Witnesses must be interviewed. Laboratory testing must be completed. Legal standards must be met. Without those steps, assumptions remain just that: assumptions. Meanwhile, the FBI's recent statement continued to generate discussion across television news programs and online forums. Some interpreted the Bureau's involvement as evidence that the investigation had reached a critical turning point. Others believed federal agents had uncovered entirely new information. The FBI, however, described its role more carefully. The Bureau said it continues assisting the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, which remains the lead investigative agency. Federal authorities also confirmed they are investigating reported interstate threats connected to people involved in the case, an issue separate from determining how Nolan died. That distinction is important because it explains why multiple investigations can occur at the same time without being focused on the same objective. One inquiry concerns threats. The other concerns Nolan's death. Although both involve federal resources, they serve different purposes. Another detail deserves attention. Throughout this investigation, officials have been measured in their public comments. That has frustrated some observers who want frequent updates. But experienced investigators often avoid discussing evidence before interviews are complete, and forensic testing has been fully evaluated. Premature statements can create problems later. Potential witnesses may unknowingly alter their memories after hearing media reports. Individuals who have not yet been interviewed might adjust their own accounts if too much investigative information becomes public. For that reason, silence from investigators should not automatically be interpreted as inactivity. In many cases, it simply reflects caution. Meanwhile, members of the public have continued organizing memorial gatherings in Nolan's honor. Flowers, handwritten notes, football memorabilia, and photographs have served as reminders that behind every headline is a young man whose absence continues to affect those who knew him. For classmates, teammates, and neighbors, the case has become more than an ongoing investigation. It has become a shared loss. Many have said they simply want the truth, whatever that truth ultimately proves to be. That sentiment has been echoed repeatedly by Nolan's family. According to public statements, they have consistently urged anyone with first-hand knowledge to cooperate with investigators rather than engage in online speculation. Their message has remained remarkably consistent from the beginning. If someone knows something that could help explain Nolan's final hours, they hope that person will come forward. As investigators continue reviewing evidence, another question naturally follows. Once detectives believe they have assembled the most accurate timeline possible, what happens next? Depending on the evidence, investigators may seek additional forensic analysis, conduct follow-up interviews, present findings to prosecutors, or determine whether any criminal charges are supported by the available facts. At this stage, officials have not publicly announced that those decisions have been finalized. That means the investigation remains active. And as long as it remains active, new evidence, or a fresh interpretation of existing evidence, could still influence its direction. For many people following this case, patience has become one of the hardest parts. Each official update provides another piece of the puzzle, yet the complete picture remains just out of reach. The GPS records have clarified important portions of the timeline. The FBI has explained its role. Witness interviews continue to shape investigators' understanding of the day. Yet one central question remains unanswered. After comparing witness statements with digital records and forensic evidence, have investigators identified any inconsistencies significant enough to change their understanding of what happened on Horn Island? That question has become one of the most closely watched aspects of the investigation. And in the final part, we'll examine what investigators have confirmed, what still remains uncertain, and why the answers may ultimately depend on evidence the public has not yet seen. As the investigation moves forward, one thing has become increasingly clear. The public has access to only a fraction of the evidence investigators have reviewed. That can make it tempting to fill in the blanks with theories, but experienced detectives know that unanswered questions are not the same as unanswered cases. In investigations like this, the final pieces often come from careful comparison rather than dramatic discoveries. A witness statement may seem insignificant until it matches a digital record. A photograph may not appear important until investigators determine exactly when it was taken. A forensic finding may not answer every question on its own, but when combined with dozens of other facts, it can become one of the strongest pieces of evidence in the case. That slow, methodical process is rarely exciting to watch, but it is how many complex investigations are ultimately resolved. Meanwhile, public attention surrounding Nolan Wells' death has remained unusually high. Part of that is because the case unfolded during a holiday weekend with hundreds of potential witnesses. Part of it is because so many people documented portions of the day with their phones. And part of it is because investigators have continued releasing information carefully, one step at a time, rather than all at once. For many viewers, every official update feels significant because each one offers another glimpse into what investigators are learning. But another reality deserves attention. Not every piece of evidence collected during an investigation becomes public. In fact, investigators often keep certain details confidential for months or even years. There are several reasons for that. Sometimes detectives want to verify whether future witnesses can accurately describe details that have never appeared in the news. Other times, prosecutors recommend withholding information to protect the integrity of a potential criminal case. In some situations, investigators simply want to avoid influencing future interviews. That means there may be evidence the public has never seen, not because authorities are hiding the truth, but because releasing it too soon could complicate the investigation. At the same time, Nolan's family has continued emphasizing that they want transparency once investigators are able to share their findings. Through public statements made by their attorney, they have consistently expressed appreciation for everyone who has come forward with credible information, while also encouraging anyone who has first-hand knowledge to cooperate with law enforcement rather than rely on social media. That message reflects a reality many families face after a high-profile tragedy. Rumors can spread much faster than verified facts. Unfortunately, those rumors often become another burden for grieving families. Imagine opening your phone every morning to find dozens of new theories about someone you loved. Some people claim certainty without having seen any official evidence. Others repeat information from anonymous online accounts as though it has already been proven. For investigators, sorting through those claims consumes valuable time. Every tip must be evaluated. Every potentially relevant lead must be checked. Most go nowhere. A few may provide useful information. The challenge is determining which is which. Another detail deserves attention. One reason the GPS timeline attracted so much interest is because electronic records do not rely on memory. Human beings naturally forget details. They estimate times incorrectly. They remember conversations differently. Digital systems, however, record information automatically. That is why investigators often consider electronic evidence an important foundation for building a timeline. But even digital evidence has limitations. GPS tracking can establish where a boat traveled. It cannot explain why someone left one location for another. Cell phone records may show when two people communicated. They cannot always reveal the full context of that conversation. Photographs capture moments. They do not always explain what happened before or after the image was taken. Each category of evidence answers different questions. Investigators must fit those answers together carefully. Here's where many observers believe the investigation now stands. Authorities have interviewed dozens of witnesses. They have reviewed digital evidence. They have examined forensic findings. The FBI has clarified that it is assisting the Jackson County Sheriff's Office while also investigating separate interstate threats related to individuals involved in the case. The Sheriff's Office continues to lead the death investigation. At the same time, officials have not publicly announced criminal charges related to Nolan's death, nor have they publicly stated that the investigation has reached its final conclusion. That tells us something important. The case remains active. Active investigations often involve ongoing analysis, even when there are no daily news conferences or dramatic public announcements. Laboratory testing may continue. Additional interviews may be conducted. New information may still be evaluated as it becomes available. That patience can be difficult for families and frustrating for the public, but it reflects the legal standard investigators must meet before making decisions that could permanently affect people's lives. As this story has unfolded, one lesson has stood out above all others. In today's world, information travels almost instantly. Evidence does not. Evidence must be collected. It must be authenticated. It must be analyzed. Only then can investigators determine whether it supports or contradicts a particular theory. That is why the official investigation sometimes appears slower than public discussion. The two are operating under very different rules. For Nolan's family, however, the pace matters far less than the outcome. They have consistently said they want answers based on facts, wherever those facts ultimately lead. Whether those answers confirm early assumptions or completely reshape the timeline, they want confidence that every available piece of evidence has been examined. That is a request most people can understand. No family wants uncertainty to become the final chapter of a loved one's story. As of today, several facts have been confirmed. Nolan Wells traveled to Horn Island on July 4th. He was later found dead, prompting an extensive investigation by the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. Authorities have interviewed dozens of witnesses and reviewed digital evidence, including GPS information, documenting the boat's movements that day. The The FBI has publicly confirmed that it is assisting local investigators while separately investigating reported interstate threats connected to individuals involved in the case. Those are documented developments. At the same time, several important questions remain unanswered publicly. Investigators have not released every forensic finding. They have not disclosed every piece of digital evidence they have examined. They have not publicly explained every event that occurred during Nolan's final hours, and they have not announced final conclusions regarding every aspect of the investigation. Until they do, it is important to distinguish between what has been confirmed and what remains the subject of speculation. Eventually, the investigation will reach a point where authorities believe they can explain the evidence in full, whether that comes through an official investigative report, a prosecutor's announcement, or future court proceedings remains to be seen. For now, the focus remains on following the evidence wherever it leads. If there's one thing this case has reminded us, it's that every headline represents a real family living through unimaginable loss. Behind every document released, every news conference, and every update is the memory of a young man whose life ended far too soon, and a family still searching for complete answers. As always, I'd like to hear your thoughts, but only on the evidence that has been confirmed so far. Which official development do you believe has been the most significant? The release of the GPS timeline, the FBI's clarification of its role, or the continued effort to compare witness statements with the available evidence? Thank you for spending this time with us. If you appreciate careful, evidence-based reporting that separates confirmed facts from speculation, consider subscribing so you won't miss future verified updates as this investigation continues. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and thank you for watching.